Now let's look at doing domain and range from graphs. So there's two different ways this could be given. They could ask you, what is the domain and range? You give you an equation, and you could draw the graph yourself, or sometimes they give you the graph. So we'll focus now on doing domain and range given the graph. So let's look at our first example. And we're going to use a square root problem because that's probably the easiest to learn from. So if you know how to graph square roots, you will notice this, and if not, then we have a video on graphing the square roots. So let's say you have y is equal to minus square root x plus 3 plus 4. Well, if you know how to graph that, then what you'll notice is that this graph will look like this. The first point will be minus 3, 4. And then it'll go downwards and it'll look something like this. So let's call that f of x. And if you want to find the domain and range of x and y, then what you do is you look at the graph and you look at the x-axis and you say, along the x-axis, what can x be and what can x not be? So if you notice here, x can be minus 3, and then it actually can be everything past minus 3 too. And the notation here is such that since you draw this and you have this arrow, then the presumption is that, well, actually not the presumption, it implied that this graph continues in this direction thusly. And in that case, if you notice, x can be everything that's bigger than minus 3. It can actually be minus 3 as well. And it can go all the way to infinity. So if you're going to use this notation, you go x is greater than or equal to minus 3. Let's look at what the range is. The range here, you look at the y-axis and you say, well, what can y be here? Where this is y is equal to, you draw the dotted line across here, you say y is equal to 4. And it can be any number more negative than 4. So you say the domain is y is less than or equal to 4. And that's in inequality notation. If you're going to use interval notation, then the domain is going to be everything from minus 3 to positive infinity. So it's minus 3 comma positive infinity. It includes minus 3, so that's going to be a bracket. And infinity is typically associated with the parentheses. Now let's look at the range. The range here will be everything from 4, but more negative than 4. So we always start with the number to the left being the more negative number. So that's everything from minus infinity to a positive 4. It includes a positive 4 with the infinities of parentheses. Let's look at domain and range from another graph. Let's do one that without a particular equation associated with it, but let's see if we can work in a lot of exceptions so that we can learn how to do those. So let's say that we had this point here. And we want to find the domain and range here. Well, the domain here, let's look and see what that would be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a minus 5. So if you notice, it starts from minus 5 and it goes to infinity. It does not include minus 5, so that would be x is greater than minus 5. And if you wanted to do that in interval notation, that would be everything from minus 5 to infinity, but it would not include minus 5, so that would be an open parentheses and open parentheses on the other as well. Now let's look at range. Come across here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7. And it goes up from there, so it's everything larger than 7, but not including 7. So it's y is greater than 7. So that would be defined as 7 parentheses infinity, and the 7 would include an open parentheses because it does not include 7. There's nothing complicated about that, but let's see if you had a second part to it, right? So let's say what would happen is that the graph from here would continue in this direction. In that case, x is everything, not only x is greater than 5, but also everything from -5 and less, so that we could say, and x is less than -5. We might want a more convenient notation for that, so what we often say is we say all real numbers, but x is not equal to -5. The way we read this is the symbol for all real numbers, so it's just an R with an extra post, means all real numbers. And the x not equal to 5 means that it excludes the point x is equal to -5. Now let's think about the range here. Range, as you come across here, before range could be everything from 7 up, and that's the same now, right? It still goes from 7 up, and that's it. So the range in this case would be the same. And the way we would write that in interval notation, let's rewrite the domain there for interval notation. Now it's going to be everything except for x is equal to -5. Another way to think about that is it goes from -infinity to -5, but it stops at -5 and does not include it, and then it includes everything from 5 to positive infinity. And then you can either put an and there, or a common symbol for and, or a universal symbol for and is like the union symbol. It's like a flattened U a little bit. If you don't know that, you can just write and. So in that case, this is the domain, and the range is unchanged at 7 to infinity. And that would be your answer if you would do it in interval notation.